The Galactic Military Academy's orientation hall buzzed with the nervous energy of 300 alien cadets from 47 different species, all trying very hard not to stare at the single human in their midst. Which was difficult, because Cadet Murphy was currently sitting in the front row, feet propped up on the seat in front of her, reading what appeared to be a magazine titled Earth Fishing Quarterly. During orientation, at the galaxy's most prestigious military institution, while General Thrackmore delivered his legendary Death Before Dishonor speech. "The weak," General Thrackmore intoned, his 12-foot frame casting an imposing shadow across the auditorium, "have no place in the Galactic Defense Corps. Only the strong survive. Only the ruthless prosper. Only the—" "Excuse me," Murphy interrupted, not looking up from an article about bass fishing techniques. "Are we going to cover actual military strategy, or is this whole thing just motivational poster slogans?" The silence that followed was the kind typically reserved for funeral services or moments before natural disasters. General Thrackmore's 4 eyes swiveled to focus on the human with the kind of attention usually reserved for particularly interesting insects. "Cadet Murphy, is it?" "That's me." Murphy turned a page. "Though I have to say, your speech could use some work. Very Evil Overlord 101. Have you considered adding some actual content?" If General Thrackmore had possessed blood vessels capable of bursting, several would have done so. As it was, his chitinous exoskeleton began making creaking sounds that suggested structural stress. "Perhaps," he said with the kind of forced calm that preceded either enlightenment or violence, "the human would like to demonstrate her superior military knowledge?" Murphy finally looked up from her magazine. "Not really. I'm more interested in this article about fly fishing. Did you know that earth trout can—" "Silence!" The roar echoed through the auditorium with enough force to rattle the reinforced windows. Several smaller cadets actually fell out of their seats. Murphy yawned. "Look," she said, closing the magazine and giving General Thrackmore her full attention. "I get that you're going for the whole intimidating drill sergeant thing, but I've had PE teachers scarier than you. Can we maybe skip to the part where you tell us about barracks assignments?" The general's mandibles began clicking in what his species considered either deep thought or preparation for violence. Given the circumstances, it was probably both. "Very well, human. Since you seem so confident, perhaps you'd care to participate in a small demonstration." Murphy shrugged. "Sure. What kind of demonstration?" "Combat training. You versus our top cadet." General Thrackmore's smile revealed several rows of teeth that evolution had clearly designed for rending flesh. "Hand-to-hand combat. No weapons. First blood wins." The auditorium erupted, in excited chittering, clicking, and what sounded like several species-specific expressions of anticipation. Murphy looked around at the suddenly animated crowd. "Hand-to-hand combat," she repeated, "against your top cadet. Cadet Vexthul of the Zephyrian Empire, undefeated in 37 matches, trained from birth in 17 different combat disciplines." Murphy considered this. "Is there betting involved? Because if there's betting, I want in on the action." "This is not a gambling establishment," General Thrackmore snapped. "This is a demonstration of military superiority." "Right, but there's definitely going to be betting, isn't there?" Murphy looked around the auditorium. "Show of hands. Who's taking odds?" Approximately 2/3 of the cadets raised various appendages. General Thrackmore's creaking intensified. "Very well. If the human survives the first 30 seconds, I'll consider her adequately prepared for basic training." 30 seconds? Murphy stood up and stretched, joints popping audibly. "That seems optimistic." "For you or for Cadet Vexthul?" Murphy grinned. "Yes." The combat demonstration area was hastily cleared in the center of the auditorium. Cadet Vexthul stepped forward, 8 feet of muscle, chitin, and barely contained violence. His species had evolved from apex predators on a world where survival of the fittest wasn't a theory, but a daily reality. Murphy walked to the center of the ring, still wearing her standard-issue jumpsuit and what appeared to be sneakers held together with duct tape. Any last words, human? Vex Thul asked, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had never lost a fight. Yeah, Murphy said, cracking her knuckles. This is going to be embarrassing. For you, certainly. We'll see. General Thrackmore raised his arm. Begin! Vex Thul moved like liquid lightning, his combat training evident in every fluid motion. He was fast, precise, and utterly confident in his superiority. Murphy stepped slightly to the left. Vex Thul's momentum carried him past her, and Murphy casually stuck out her foot. The galaxy's most feared warrior species top cadet hit the ground face first with a sound like a sack of wet concrete meeting an immovable object. Huh, Murphy observed. That was easier than expected. Vex Thul rolled to his feet with the grace of a natural predator, his eyes now showing the kind of respect usually reserved for worthy opponents. Impressive, but you merely delayed the inevitable. He attacked again, this time with a series of strikes that would have reduced most opponents to component atoms. Murphy avoided them all with what appeared to be casual effort, occasionally offering helpful commentary. Your form's not bad, but you're telegraphing your punches. Also, you might want to work on your footwork. Very stabby. Stabby? Vex Thul paused mid-attack. You know, lots of sharp, aggressive movements. Very alien death machine. Not much. Flow. I am a warrior of the Zephyrian Empire. Right. But you're fighting like you're trying to kill me quickly instead of actually, fighting. Vex Thul's confusion lasted exactly long enough for Murphy to demonstrate the difference. The next 30 seconds were educational for everyone involved. Murphy moved like she was choreographing a dance routine, each movement flowing into the next with the kind of casual efficiency that suggested this was all very routine for her. Vex Thul, meanwhile, discovered that being the galaxy's most feared warrior species didn't necessarily prepare you for fighting someone who treated combat like a mild inconvenience. When the dust settled, Murphy was standing over Vex Thul's unconscious form, not even breathing hard. Well, she said to the stunned auditorium, that was fun. What's next? General Thrackmore stared at the scene with the expression of someone whose worldview had just been systematically dismantled and rebuilt around the concept of human unpredictability. That, he said slowly, should not have been possible. What, beating your top cadet? It wasn't that hard. He's got good technique, but he's never fought anyone who didn't fight back the way he expected. Humans are supposed to be weak, fragile. Your species barely qualifies for military service according to our physical assessments. Murphy looked down at the unconscious Vex Thul, then back at the general. Your assessments might need some updating. This changes nothing. One lucky victory does not. Murphy walked over to where General Thrackmore was standing and looked up at his imposing 12-foot frame. General, she said pleasantly, would you like to test that theory? The challenge hung in the air like a live grenade with the pin pulled. 300 alien cadets held their breath. General Thrackmore's mandibles clicked faster. You would challenge me. I am a decorated veteran of 18 campaigns. I have personally defeated champions from 23 different species. Cool, Murphy said. So you're experienced. That should make this more interesting. What happened next would later be described by military historians as the moment everything changed, and by the cadets who witnessed it as the day the human broke physics. General Thrackmore attacked with the fury of someone whose professional reputation was on the line. He was faster than Vex Thul, stronger than Vex Thul, and had decades more experience than Vex Thul. None of that mattered. Murphy caught his first strike, redirected his momentum, and used the general's own force against him. What followed was less a fight than a physics demonstration, with General Thrackmore serving as an unwilling teaching aid. The end came when Murphy grabbed the general by what passed for his head and, with a casual motion that suggested she was tossing a basketball, threw it clean off his shoulders. The head bounced twice and rolled to a stop at the feet of the front row cadets. Murphy dusted off her hands and looked around the auditorium. So, she said into the absolute silence, who's next? The emergency session of the Galactic Military Council was called exactly 47 minutes after General Thrackmore's head stopped rolling. By the time the council members had assembled in their crisis chamber, reports were already flooding in from 17 different news networks, 43 military academies, and what appeared to be a betting syndicate that had somehow managed to stream the entire incident across the galaxy. Admiral Kexithera of the Altarian fleet stared at the holographic replay for the 15th time, her tentacles writhing with what her species considered deep contemplation mixed with existential dread. "Explain to me again," she said to the assembled council, "how a single human cadet managed to decapitate our most decorated general with her bare hands." "The preliminary reports suggest it was some form of advanced combat technique unknown to our databases," offered General Zixtar of the Rigelian Defense Force, his compound eyes reflecting the kind of confusion typically associated with mathematical paradoxes. "Advanced combat technique?" Admiral Kexithera's tentacles stopped writhing and began what could only be described as aggressive gesticulation. She threw his head off. "That's not a technique. That's a biological impossibility." "Perhaps," suggested Commander Vexnil of the Corvin Intelligence Division, "we should consider the possibility that our assessments of human capabilities have been inadequate." The silence that followed this suggestion was the kind typically reserved for moments when someone points out that the Emperor's new clothes are actually invisible. "Inadequate," Admiral Kexithera repeated slowly. "Our xenobiological assessments, conducted by the galaxy's finest scientists, using the most advanced technology available, concluded that humans are barely capable of surviving in a standard gravity environment without mechanical assistance." "Yes, ma'am." "Our military analysts determined that human combat capabilities ranked somewhere between decorative and mildly concerning to small insects." "That is correct, ma'am." "And yet we have holographic evidence of a human cadet treating our most elite warrior like a piece of sporting equipment." Commander Vexnil consulted his datapad. "The replay analysis suggests she was having fun." "Having fun?" "Yes, ma'am." Our behavioral specialists noted several indicators of what humans call amusement during the encounter. She appeared to be enjoying herself. Admiral Kexithera's tentacles began a complex pattern that the universal translator struggled to render as anything more coherent than incomprehensible rage mixed with cosmic bewilderment. "Sir," interrupted Lieutenant Thexmol, bursting into the chamber with the kind of urgency typically reserved for galactic emergencies, "we have a situation." "More of a situation than a human cadet decapitating a general?" Admiral Kexithera asked. "Yes, ma'am. The human has been interacting with the other cadets." The council members exchanged glances that needed no translation. "Define interacting," General Zixtar said carefully. "She's been giving them combat lessons." The silence stretched until Lieutenant Thexmol began to wonder if the translation matrix had malfunctioned. "Combat lessons," Admiral Kexithera finally managed. "Yes, ma'am. Apparently, several cadets approached her after the incident and requested instruction in human fighting techniques. And she agreed, said it would be fun to see what they could learn." Commander Vexnil looked up from his datapad. "How many cadets?" "Initially 12. But word spread quickly. Current count is 237. 237 cadets are receiving combat instruction from the human who decapitated General Thrackmore." "Yes, sir." "And this is happening where, exactly?" "The main training facility. She requisitioned it for what she called basic self-defense lessons." Admiral Kexithera's tentacles had progressed beyond gesticulation and were now performing what appeared to be an interpretive dance representing the heat death of the universe. "Get me a live feed," she ordered. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the Academy's main training facility. What they saw would later be described by military historians as the moment the galaxy realized it had made a fundamental error in its understanding of human nature. Murphy stood in the center of the facility, surrounded by cadets from dozens of different species. She was demonstrating what appeared to be basic hand-to-hand combat techniques, her movements casual and fluid. The key, her voice carried clearly through the audio feed, is not to fight harder, but to fight smarter. Your opponent's strength becomes your advantage if you know how to use it. She gestured to Cadet Vex Thule, who had apparently recovered from his earlier encounter and was now serving as a willing demonstration partner. Vex here is bigger, stronger, and has natural weapons. In a straight fight, those are advantages, but watch what happens when you change the rules. What followed was a demonstration that would fundamentally alter galactic military doctrine. Murphy showed the assembled cadets how to use an opponent's momentum against them, how to identify and exploit structural weaknesses, and how to turn superior size and strength into liabilities. It's not about being the strongest, she explained, casually flipping Vex Thule over her shoulder. It's about being the most adaptable. The cadets watched with the kind of rapt attention typically reserved for religious experiences or really good explosions. Human Murphy, one of them asked, a Zephyrian whose species was renowned for their warrior culture. How do we learn to move like you do? Murphy considered the question. Practice, mostly. But also, you need to stop thinking like warriors and start thinking like humans. What is the difference? Warriors fight to prove they're the strongest. Humans fight to win. In the council chamber, Admiral Kexithara was experiencing what her species called catastrophic worldview realignment. She's teaching them human combat philosophy, she whispered. Is that bad? Asked General Zixtar. General, our entire military structure is based on the assumption that superior size, strength, and natural weapons determine combat effectiveness. If the human is correct, then every military doctrine we've developed over the past 1,000 years is obsolete? Adorably naive. The feed continued to show Murphy working with individual cadets, helping them understand concepts that apparently didn't exist in traditional galactic military training. The cadets were learning quickly, their movements becoming more fluid, more adaptive. Sir, Lieutenant Thexmol interrupted again. We're receiving reports from 17 other military academies. What kind of reports? Similar incidents. Humans are excelling in ways that don't match their assessments. Admiral Kexithara's tentacles stopped moving entirely, which in her species indicated either deep meditation or complete system shutdown. How many humans are currently enrolled in galactic military academies? Commander Vexnil consulted his datapad. Approximately 4,000. 4,000 humans are currently receiving advanced military training based on our fundamental misunderstanding of their capabilities. Yes, ma'am. And they're sharing their knowledge with alien cadets. That appears to be correct. Who are learning to fight like humans? Yes, ma'am. Admiral Kexithara looked around the council chamber, taking in the expressions of her fellow officers. They all wore the same look, the kind of dawning realization that usually preceded either enlightenment or panic. Gentlemen, she said quietly, I believe we may have accidentally created the most effective military force in galactic history. Ma'am. And we have no idea how to control it. The holographic display flickered as an urgent message appeared. Priority alert. Human cadet at Rigelian Military Academy has just defeated entire senior class in simulated combat exercise, requesting immediate guidance. Then another. Emergency. Human instructor at Corvin War College has revolutionized tactical doctrine. Cadets showing 347% improvement in combat effectiveness. And another. Urgent. Human exchange student has accidentally solved the Altarian strategic defense paradox that has puzzled our military theorists for 3 centuries, used what she called common sense. Admiral Kexithara watched the alerts multiply across her display, each one representing another fundamental challenge to everything they thought they knew about military science. Sir, Lieutenant Thexmol said quietly, what are your orders? Admiral Kexithara's tentacles began a slow, rhythmic movement that her species associated with either prayer or preparation for the apocalypse. I honestly have no idea. On the training facility feed, Murphy had moved on to what she called advanced problem-solving techniques. She was teaching the cadets to think creatively, to improvise, to adapt their tactics based on circumstances rather than following predetermined patterns. The thing about humans, she was saying, is that we don't really have a standard way of doing things. We just figure it out as we go along. But how do you plan for unknown variables? Asked a Corvan cadet. Murphy grinned. You don't plan for them. You get really good at making things up on the spot. The concept seemed to break something fundamental in the alien cadets' understanding of military doctrine, but they were absorbing it with the enthusiasm of beings who had just discovered fire. In the council chamber, Admiral Kexthera came to a decision that would later be remembered as either the most brilliant or most catastrophic command decision in galactic military history. Recall all human military personnel immediately, she ordered. Ma'am, every human cadet, instructor, exchange student, and observer. I want them all brought to Central Command for immediate reassessment. On what grounds? Admiral Kexthera looked at the display showing Murphy teaching alien cadets to think like humans, and realized that the galaxy was about to change in ways no one had anticipated. On the grounds that we may have just discovered that humans aren't the weakest species in the galaxy, she said quietly. They might be the most dangerous. The recall order went out at 1347 Galactic Standard Time. By 1400, it had been intercepted by 17 different intelligence agencies, 43 news networks, and what appeared to be a gambling syndicate that was already taking bets on the outcome. By 1430, every human military personnel in the galaxy knew they were being recalled. By 1445, they had collectively decided that this was probably not a good sign. By 1500, they had done what humans do when faced with bureaucratic nonsense. They ignored it completely and continued with their daily activities. Murphy was in the middle of explaining advanced tactical improvisation to a group of increasingly enthusiastic alien cadets when her communicator buzzed with the recall notice. Huh, she said, reading the message. Apparently, I'm supposed to report to Central Command immediately for reassessment of threat level. The cadets exchanged glances. After spending the morning learning to think like humans, they had developed what could charitably be called a healthy skepticism toward official orders that didn't make sense. Threat level? Asked Cadet Vex Thul, who had become something of an unofficial spokesperson for the group. What threat? Beats me. Murphy shrugged. Maybe they're worried I'll teach more people how to fight effectively. Is that not the purpose of military training? Asked a Rigelian cadet, whose compound eyes were reflecting what the universal translator identified as confusion with undertones of philosophical crisis. You'd think so, wouldn't you? Murphy looked around at the assembled cadets, representatives of dozens of species who had spent the morning learning that everything they thought they knew about combat was, at best, incomplete. You know what? She said, making the kind of decision that would later be studied in military academies across the galaxy as either brilliant leadership or catastrophic insubordination. I think I'll pass on the reassessment. You're refusing a direct order? Vexthul asked. I'm prioritizing my educational responsibilities, Murphy corrected. We haven't finished today's lesson on creative problem solving. What if they send security forces to retrieve you? Murphy grinned. Then we'll have a practical demonstration of advanced defensive tactics. The cadets looked at each other with expressions that suggested they were beginning to understand why humans might be considered dangerous. Meanwhile, in the Central Command Crisis Center, Admiral Kexthera was discovering that recalling humans was significantly more complicated than issuing the order. Status report, she demanded. Approximately 60% of human personnel have acknowledged receipt of the recall order, reported Commander Vex Nil. And they've declined to comply. Admiral Kexthera's tentacles performed a complex gesture that the universal translator rendered as incomprehensible frustration with existential overtones. They declined, yes ma'am. Most cited prior commitments or educational responsibilities. Several mentioned something about bureaucratic nonsense. What about the other 40%? They haven't responded at all. Our communication specialists believe they may be Ignoring us. 4,000 humans are collectively ignoring a direct order from Central Command. That appears to be correct, ma'am. Admiral Kexathara consulted her tactical display, which was now showing human personnel locations across the galaxy. Instead of the orderly convergence toward Central Command she had expected, the display showed humans continuing their normal activities with what appeared to be deliberate casualness. What are they doing instead? Commander Vexnil consulted his reports. Teaching, mostly. Combat instruction, tactical analysis, strategic planning. Several have started what they call study groups with alien personnel. Study groups? Yes, ma'am. Informal educational sessions focused on human military philosophy and adaptive combat techniques. They're spreading human military doctrine throughout the Galactic Defense Forces. It appears so. Admiral Kexathara's tentacles began the complex pattern her species associated with impending nervous breakdown. Sir, interrupted Lieutenant Thexmol, we're receiving reports from the field. What kind of reports? Unusual ones. Military units with human personnel are showing unexpected performance improvements. Define unexpected. Lieutenant Thexmol consulted his datapad. The 47th Rigelian Defense Battalion, which includes 3 human advisors, just successfully completed a training exercise that was designed to be impossible. Impossible how? The scenario required defending against a numerically superior force with limited resources and no strategic advantages. Previous attempts by other battalions had resulted in complete failure within the first hour. And the 47th held out for 6 hours and actually achieved tactical victory. How? According to the report, the humans suggested they try something different. Admiral Kexathara stared at the tactical display, watching red dots representing human personnel continue to ignore her orders while apparently revolutionizing galactic military effectiveness. What did they try? Guerrilla tactics, improvised weapons, psychological warfare, and something the report describes as aggressive creativity. Aggressive creativity. Yes, ma'am. The human advisors taught the battalion to think outside established tactical parameters and adapt their strategies based on changing circumstances. And this worked. Spectacularly. Another report appeared on the display. 79th Corvan Strike Force reports 400% improvement in combat readiness after implementing human-suggested modifications to standard training protocols. Then another. Altarian Naval Academy requests immediate expansion of human exchange program after cadets demonstrate unprecedented improvement in strategic thinking. And another. Zephyrian Warrior Academy reports that human combat instructor has solved 17 previously unsolvable tactical problems using what she calls basic common sense. Admiral Kexathara watched the reports multiply, each one representing another crack in the foundation of everything she thought she understood about military science. Sir, Commander Vexnil said quietly, I'm beginning to think the recall order may have been premature. Premature? The humans appear to be improving our military effectiveness, not threatening it. By ignoring orders and teaching unauthorized combat techniques to alien personnel. Yes, ma'am. Admiral Kexathara's tentacles stopped moving entirely, a sign that her species was either achieving enlightenment or experiencing complete system failure. Get me a direct line to the human at the military academy, she ordered. Cadet Murphy? Yes, I want to speak with her directly. The communication link crackled to life, showing Murphy in the middle of what appeared to be an advanced seminar on tactical improvisation. She was surrounded by alien cadets who were hanging on her every word. Admiral Kexathara, Murphy said cheerfully when she noticed the communication link. I was wondering when you'd call. Cadet Murphy, you have been ordered to report to Central Command immediately. Yeah, I got the message. I decided to pass. This is not a request. This is a direct order. Murphy looked around at the assembled cadets, then back at the display. Admiral, with all due respect, I'm in the middle of teaching these cadets how not to die in combat. That seems more important than whatever bureaucratic panic is happening at Central Command. You are in violation of military protocol. I'm prioritizing mission effectiveness over procedural compliance, Murphy corrected. Isn't that what good soldiers are supposed to do? Admiral Kexithera's tentacles began a slow, rhythmic movement that suggested she was either counting to 10 or preparing for violence. Cadet Murphy, do you understand that your refusal to comply with orders could be considered mutiny? Could be, Murphy agreed. But it could also be considered taking initiative in the face of counterproductive orders from superiors who don't understand the situation. And what situation is that? Murphy gestured to the cadets around her. These beings are learning to be better soldiers. They're thinking more creatively, adapting more quickly, and solving problems more effectively. Yesterday, they were following rigid doctrines that got people killed. Today, they're learning to think for themselves. That is not how military discipline works. Maybe that's the problem. The silence that followed was the kind that usually preceded either profound realizations or declarations of war. Cadet Murphy, Admiral Kexithera said slowly, are you suggesting that our entire military structure is fundamentally flawed? I'm suggesting that maybe there's room for improvement. Based on human military philosophy. Based on what works. Admiral Kexithera looked at the tactical display showing reports of improved performance from every unit with human personnel, then at the communication link showing Murphy surrounded by alien cadets who were clearly learning to think in ways that didn't exist in traditional military doctrine. Cadet Murphy, she said finally, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want a direct answer. Shoot. Do you believe that human military doctrine is superior to galactic standard practices? Murphy considered the question for a moment. I think human military doctrine is different. We don't rely on superior size, strength, or natural weapons. We rely on adaptability, creativity, and the willingness to try things that might not work. And you believe this approach is more effective? I believe it's more flexible. In a universe full of different species with different capabilities, flexibility beats specialization. Admiral Kexithera's tentacles performed a complex pattern that the universal translator struggled to render as anything more coherent than worldview, collapsing in real time. Cadet Murphy, she said quietly, what would you say if I told you that your presence in our military academies has fundamentally challenged everything we thought we knew about warfare? Murphy grinned. I'd say that sounds like a good start. That's when the emergency alert appeared on every display in the crisis center. Priority 1 alert. Hostile fleet detected at Sector 7. All available forces respond immediately. This is not a drill. Admiral Kexithera stared at the alert, then at Murphy's image on the communication link. Cadet Murphy, she said, how would you like to test your theories under actual combat conditions? The hostile fleet that appeared at Sector 7 belonged to the hegemony of Sorth, who had chosen this moment to attack because their intelligence suggested galactic forces were in disarray due to human contamination. They weren't wrong about the disarray, they just misunderstood what kind. Admiral Kexithera commanded a defense fleet that included 17 ships with humans technically violating orders, 43 alien commanders trained in human tactics, and 4,000 personnel who'd learned creativity over protocol. Status report, she ordered. 47 enemy heavy cruisers, 200 support vessels. We're outnumbered 2-1, reported Commander Vexnil. Under normal circumstances, this meant retreat. These weren't normal circumstances. Admiral, Murphy's voice crackled over comms, request permission to coordinate fleet tactics. Every military instinct told Kexithera to follow protocol. Every report from the past day told her protocol was inadequate. Patch me through to all human personnel, she ordered. Dozens of communication links lit up. Humans throughout the fleet looked back with expressions ranging from eager anticipation to mild amusement. I'm asking for suggestions on defeating a superior force using tactics that aren't in any manual, she announced. The response was immediate. Classic misdirection, suggested one tactical officer. Make them think we're retreating while repositioning for flanking. Psychological warfare, added another. They expect standard protocols. Let's do something unexpected. Improvised weapons, called a third. That asteroid field could become guided missiles with creative engineering. Murphy, coordinate with all humans. 15 minutes for a unified plan. What followed was the most chaotic, creative tactical planning in galactic history. The resulting strategy violated 17 sections of military doctrine. We call it aggressive confusion with a side of improvised mayhem, Murphy reported. That's not a real designation. It is now. The plan involved feints within feints, improvised weapons, psychological warfare, and strategic unpredictability. It was complex, risky, and completely unprecedented. It was also probably going to work. All ships, implement human tactical plan, Kexathera ordered. The battle lasted 43 minutes. The hegemony fleet, expecting standard maneuvers, encountered coordinated chaos. Ships retreated, then flanked from impossible angles. Asteroids became minefields. Casual conversation somehow achieved perfect coordination. When it ended, the enemy was destroyed, captured, or fleeing. Galactic losses were minimal. "I think we can call that a success," Murphy announced. "I think we can call that a revolution," Kexathera replied. 6 months later, the Galactic Defense Forces had restructured around Human Integrated Tactical Doctrine. Murphy, now Tactical Innovation Specialist, trained alien commanders in human military philosophy. "There's no standard situation," she told her latest class. "Every problem is unique. Every solution requires creativity." "But how do we plan for infinite variables?" asked a Zephyrian general. Murphy grinned. "You don't plan for them. You get really good at improvising." Admiral Kexathera, now Director of Human Military Integration, often reflected on the day a human cadet threw a general's head and asked who was next. The answer had been everyone, and the galaxy was much more interesting because of it. "When we first met humans, we thought you were primitive," she told Murphy during a strategy session. "And now we realize not having natural weapons made you creative. Not having armor made you adaptable. Not having standard methods made you excellent at everything." Murphy nodded. "Funny how that works." Kexathera looked out at the galaxy humans had accidentally revolutionized and wondered what they'd improve next. Knowing humans, nobody would see it coming, and it would work better than expected.